The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and actually having to rise one more time to talk about this important issue. I had an opportunity to get some questions in. It was nice to hear from the minister how much affection he has for me, and perhaps to save some of the suspense, I can be persuaded to vote for this bill, not to fast track it all the way to the Senate, because maybe we have some amendments. As he did mention, there are a couple ideas that they plagiarized, the government plagiarized from other parties in this House, both the Conservatives and, dare I say, even the NDP.
No.
Now, I have lots of questions, and I want to just focus on process for a minute. Typically, a government introduces significant money bills twice per year. They table a budget in the spring, and then there's important measures included in a budget bill in the spring, and then they have a budget bill usually sometime in the late fall, and we typically pass it before everyone goes home for the winter break, Christmas holidays. 5 ministers, did a press conference last week at the National Press Gallery where they all exclaimed, "This bill is so important in order to address problems in the country." That's nice. They're finally waking up. But if these ideas were so amazingly brilliant and needed, why did the government omit them from the budget? The government spends 12 months preparing a budget, and they basically admit just a couple months later, we didn't get it all right. We got a couple more ideas. But where did they get those ideas? They found out that the leader of the official opposition was tabling a bill in this House to reduce the GST on purpose-built rentals. So they rushed like heck to get a bill ready to do just that. There was 2 bills before this House tabled to get rid of the efficiencies defense, one by the NDP and one by the member from Bay Quinte, Conservative member, to get rid of the efficiencies defense. The Minister of Industry last week said, getting rid of the efficiencies defense is about time, we have to do it. Well, if they thought it was such an important idea, they could have fast-tracked any piece of those legislations in June before we left for the summer. So what's changed? Why all of a sudden do they all of a sudden have these so-called solutions to problems that the government hasn't even been able to admit exist? The process matters because it highlights that this is a tired government that's out of ideas, that they're plagiarizing their homework. They're now rushing and likely to make mistakes by rushing by doing significant money bills in such short notice. And frankly, when you talk about the efficiencies defense, it was the Minister of Industry who last year, in last budget, introduced what he called sweeping changes to the Competition Act reform that hadn't been seen in at least a decade. Well, if this was such an important change to make to the Competition Act last year, or why didn't he make it last year? Why is he waiting till now? Well, I tell you why he's waiting, because the leader of the NDP made this suggestion and a member from the Conservative Party made this suggestion. They're actually run out of ideas, but you can't blame them. It's human nature. How can you believe that you need solutions to problems when for months members of the government were telling Canadians that no problems exist? Let's read a few quotes. Or shall we? Let's go back to the tape. As they say, we're now in football season. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives continue to talk down the Canadian economy, but the reality is that Canada is the best country in the world when coping with the challenging global economic environment, and their economy grew faster than every other economy. Mr. Speaker, the reality is Canada's doing really well. Inflation is way better here than it is elsewhere. As a response to a Conservative member in this House, when a Conservative member stood up and said, asked the Minister of Finance, what happens if inflation lasts just a little longer than you think and we hit a period of economic uncertainty? That question was asked in May of 2022, and the answer was, from the Minister of Finance, I have to urge a bit of economic literacy among the members opposite. The reality is the Canadian economy grew by 3.1% on an annualized basis for the first quarter of the year. An unwillingness to admit that there is trouble on the horizon. Now, last quarter, GDP contracted. And guess what? Inflation is still around. But now, don't worry, the government's here to solve your problems because they're just realizing that there's a problem. And they have all these solutions, but they're not their solutions. They're solutions from others. So am I happy that they took some ideas from opposition parties? Of course I am, Madam Speaker. But it just goes to show you that they're actually just running out of ideas. This government told everybody that interest rates would remain low forever, and they haven't. They said because interest rates are low, we have to spend. It would be unwise to not spend. We are now going to spend as much in debt service costs this year as we send to provinces to deliver health care. And it's only going to get worse for debt service costs. Because when the budget was tabled, every economist, including the government and the Governor of the Bank of Canada and all the experts, said interest rates were going to go down by the end of the year. Except they haven't. They've actually gone up, not down. That change is going to represent billions of dollars of more spending to service the debt, even just this year, but for the next at least 5 years as they renegotiate and repaper and roll over $421 billion of debt this year. The reason why they have to roll over $421 billion was complete and utter negligence in the way they financed their COVID spending when COVID hit. They told everyone interest rates were going to remain low forever, and they even believed it themselves because when they issued the debt, only issued short-term debt. I can't take credit for that on myself, Madam Speaker. Very smart individual, Richard Dias, who is a well-known economist, showed that the government could have saved billions of dollars by issuing long bonds. But they chose to issue short-term bonds during the pandemic. Now, we can't forget that Liberal Twitter and the finance minister was starting the parade when in 1 month out of 28 months, inflation dropped below 3%. They said their job was done. The government's plan to bring down inflation is working. They really actually haven't done that much. And they've ignored to do the actual one thing, or maybe even two things that would have a difference. One, reduce spending. And two, you don't have to be Einstein's cousin to realize if you reduce taxes on the good that's causing inflation, you will reduce inflation. But for some reason, that's pretty hard to figure out for the members on the other side of this chamber. But Canadians are smarter than that. They know better than to trust a government to have solutions to the problems that they don't believe exist. I'm glad that they're borrowing some ideas from the opposition parties. I look forward to sending the bill to committee. I look forward to bringing some amendments because I think it could actually be better. We could expand the GST rebate to include, why aren't we including triplexes, co-ops, duplexes? We could be driving more investment in this country, but they don't want, they are determined to not have any other party in this chamber get a win. Thank you, Madam Speaker.